Diamond Digest podcast. I'm your host today, Brian Schlosser, here with my boys John and Nate. John and Nate, good to see you both.
Good to see you. Good to see you. How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Excited to be here.
Yes, sir.
Doing pretty well. Got some mashed potatoes with my name on them in a couple days.
Can't be mad about that. Yeah, you guys got Thanksgiving down there coming up soon. I'm jealous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's literally nothing better than a holiday that just stuff your face.
Football all day.
And, we're a normal country that doesn't do it on a Monday, too. So we have that going for us as well.
I give you that. That is definitely something America's got on Canada. This is a much better time for Thanksgiving. I couldn't agree with that more.
So in terms of Thanksgiving, I think there's one fan base that's pretty thankful for what their team has done already. The White Sox already inked Yasmani Grandal, which is, he's the best. He's the best catcher in baseball to me.
I agree.
Respect to JT Realmuto, but. And what's weird to me is that this is the biggest contract that the White Sox have ever handed out. If I remember right, it was a 4-year, $73 million contract, and that's the most amount of money they've ever given out in a single contract.
That's crazy. Like, the Red Sox give those out like 3 or 4 in off season. Like, that's wild that is the most the White Sox have ever spent. That really surprised me, too. Yeah, that's crazy.
I think it's interesting. I also think it's slightly interesting that they chose to go big on a 31-year-old catcher. Don't get me wrong. I love Grandal, but, after watching him for a season in Milwaukee trying to, run out infield hits, God only knows what he's going to look like when he's entering his, 33 and 34-year-old seasons.
Yeah.
But I guess, that's what the DH is for. So
yeah,
they can make those, they can go for that. But no, I think he was a huge pickup, and I think it's, good for baseball as a whole to see a big free agent signing, this early in the offseason as well.
Absolutely. And getting what he's worth, I think, too. Not only was it this early, but I think 4 for 73 is pretty good value for both sides. I think Grandal got paid to what he deserved, but the White Sox, I don't think, at least AAV-wise, overpaid. So it's good to see these deals getting done early and to a reasonable extent financially.
Yeah, to that point, last offseason, we were waiting for Harper and Machado to sign for basically the whole offseason, even into spring training. We were seeing extensions getting done, but we weren't seeing the big names getting signed. So, is Grandal kind of setting this new precedent of big free agents signing early and just not waiting around, or what?
I hope so.
Yeah, I think that, based on the last few off seasons, it's clear that the dynamics are shifting in terms of how free agents sign and how teams are going to sign them. So if you can get a deal and you can get the money you want sooner rather than later, I would assume players feel, let's just get it done and move on, as opposed to being in limbo and, possibly even going into the start of the season or early spring training, not being signed to a team.
Yeah, I feel like that would alter your preparation a whole lot if you had to you didn't know where you were going, who you were playing with, what the state of that team was in. If you don't know this until February or even early March, like Harper did, how are you supposed to properly prepare to head into that season? I feel like Grandal now having 4 or 5 months to get accustomed to Chicago, to the other players, to how that team operates. I think that's going to be a huge advantage for him for just kind of assimilating into a new team.
Yeah, and just not having to worry about where you're going to go. Like Harper had his deals on the table, but he knew where he wanted to be, but Washington didn't give it to him. So the whole offseason, he just spent worrying about where he's going to be if the Nats didn't give him the deal he wanted, which evidently they didn't. He ends up getting to Philly. They were showing how badly they wanted him too, during the course of the offseason, but he just didn't know he was going to be there until he was there, basically.
Yeah. And his press conference for his introductory was down at their spring training facility. That's how late it was. It was in Florida or wherever, because they did it, late. Was a second last week of February. That's just, it's got to be a whole different dynamic because when it comes to your approach to the new season, I feel like that would throw me off a whole lot.
Yeah, you're in this time where all big players were getting extended last year. It was Bregman, Trout, Arenado, and all of them got extended during spring training. And Harper's contract is getting announced within the same time frame that those guys' extensions are, which made no sense to me.
Yeah, not at all. That's just crazy to see how far we've come, because that never would have been the case even 5-6 years ago. And now that was the norm for the last couple of years.
Yeah, usually you used to be able to point to the winter meetings as like a place where, oh yeah, this guy's not leaving the winter meetings as a free agent. Like I remember, I mean, I'm an Angels fan, so it's more of a nightmare, but 2011 offseason, Albert Pujols gets signed to the winter meetings, just the bombshell where the Angels pick him up. I don't remember if Josh Hamilton was a winter meeting signing also, but that used to be where your big deals happen. And I know for a fact last year almost nothing big happened.
Yeah.
No, everybody was holding out. Of course, everybody wanted the big name players to go first to drive up the value of everybody underneath them. So, it was interesting how last season and, like I said, the season before played out. And, hopefully, I think just from a fan standpoint, hopefully that changes because, being led on for an entire winter, it's like a tease. Hey, it's going to happen today. It's going to happen today. Eventually you're just sick about hearing it. And when it finally does happen, to what we were just saying, you're already in spring training and, unless you're a member of the Phillies or unless you're a member of the Padres or, whatever player we're talking about, no one cares by that point. We're, back invested into our specific teams and what they're doing. So, exactly. I think from a hot stove standpoint, hopefully things will be more exciting this year, seeing Yasmani sign early and, set a precedent or set a standard.
Yeah, I hope that gets the ball rolling. That was my first thought, at least, is hopefully this is signifying maybe a new era in this offseason. We'll see some good deals coming up in the next month or so.
Only one I'm looking for is Garrett Cole to the Angels.
Garrett Cole to the Red Sox? You cut out there. Did you say Garrett Cole to the Red Sox?
Yeah, right after you trade Mookie.
Don't even put that evil on me. Don't you even bring that into the world.
Mookie's gone, dude. Just deal with it.
Yeah, and believe me, I'm not gonna get too much into that. Don't worry. But I think it could be okay. I think Kyle Bloom knows what he's doing, and even if Mookie has to go, I think he's gonna get the best possible return. I think it could be okay.
Check out our boy's article on the Patrick Ewing effect. Right on Diamond Digest.
Not the end of the world when you lose your best player. Go find out why. That was a good plug. That was a really good plug.
Yeah, I got you always. So another thing that's going on right now is that some people's ballots are starting to become public for the Hall of Fame, and unfortunately, the reasons that that's circulating is the fact that 2 out of I think 6 now public ballots have voted for only Derek Jeter.
God.
Yeah. So it's not that Derek Jeter shouldn't be a Hall of Famer, but I think most of us are going to agree with the sentiment that voting for only Derek Jeter to prove a point or whatever they're trying to do is just ridiculous.
Well, I think this, is a demonstration of the fact that you have a bunch of old white men that are still in charge of this process, for better or worse. These are guys who have probably don't even write anymore for any, publication of substance, but are still members of the Baseball Writers, of America, and they have a vote, but they also still think milk costs a nickel, per gallon and stuff like that, and they're living in a world that just makes no sense to anyone else that it has any sense of the present. So I think there's a lot of that the baseball writers need to really, in the Hall of Fame needs to get a grasp on who is a member of their voting, organization at this point in time, and start, either narrowing it down or kind of reining it back into guys that are actually involved in the game to some degree.
Well, that would be what I would say is I think you have to revamp who is voting, because the people that are voting this way aren't just going to all of a sudden change their minds. And the people that have always voted this way and are going to just vote for Jeter, they're not going to all of a sudden just change their minds at age 78 or whatever. I think you got to kind of phase these guys out who, like you said, aren't really writing anymore and not too associated with any of the teams, and get some of these younger writers. There is probably 50 beat reporters for every single team that could provide better ballots than some of the ones we've seen.
Well, and even past the beat reporters. Guys who write for Fangraphs, guys who write
for
Baseball Reference. Any of these guys who could be beat reporters if they chose. They just don't want to go that route because, again, it's almost 2020.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's the key, is getting fresh blood in there, and at the least, and possibly even going past there and considering whether you include players, whether you include retired players, whether you mix it
Hall
up
of Fame members.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that would also be a good call.
Like that.
Yeah, because this just makes me like, I can't believe I'm waking up and I have to talk about Derek Jeter being the only name on somebody's ballot. That literally makes me nauseous. You have 10 spots to fill, and there is at least 10 players on there who deserve a vote, and you vote for one single player. That literally makes me sick. I cannot believe that is happening. Like, drives me nuts.
The problem that I have with that one is that people are using Derek Jeter as like the standard of induction. And the problem with that is that you got a bunch of old heads that are using traditional stats as their measure of eligibility, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, sure, the guy had 3,400 hits. There's nobody saying that he's not a Hall of Famer, but you got guys saying that, oh, well, he was a good defender because he won 5 Gold Gloves, when there are multiple metrics saying that he was, like, statistically the worst defender of all time. And their only argument becomes, oh, yeah, well, defensive metrics aren't true yet, so, like, maybe that's not true. It's like, okay, if you have, regardless of how spotty they are, if you have multiple defensive metrics saying, yeah, this guy was the worst of all time,
it's not a coincidence.
Yeah. What if you fix them? What is that going to do?
Yeah,
make him fifth worst?
Yeah, like he's down there for a reason.
Like I could just like fall to my left and have more range than Jeter had at short.
You're not wrong at all.
No, and I think I'm assuming for all of us, I can say, I personally love Jeter, Brian. I know you were saying, you grew up being a Jeter fan. It's nothing against Jeter, but you're 100% right that, using him as the kind of basis for how you're going to create your entire ballot is foolish. I mean, using any player for the basis or baseline of how you're going to vote is stupid. And yeah, there's no doubt that Jeter, definitely did not have much range. There's no doubt that in this day and age, he'd be lucky to win 1 Gold Glove. On the other hand, he was fun to watch. I'll never forget the 96 season when, he kind of came about and, just became who he was to some degree. And I know you guys were still in diapers at that point in time. But, that's one of the years, especially with the Brewers being so damn horrid in those, mid 90s and really, my entire life. It was just fun to see, a team play like that and to see an individual play like that on the biggest stage in baseball. So, I think hats off to Derek Jeter, but hold him on a pedestal of any type is foolish. And try to make any statement based on him seems foolish as well, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think all of what you just said definitely merits him being a Hall of Famer. I don't think that's even in the question at all. And even if some of these people don't feel obligated to vote for steroid users, which sure, I can respect that, there's still no reason to put one name on your ballot. Steroids or not, you got the Larry Walkers, the Billy Wagners, the Scott Rowlands. Like, there is so many other names that how you feel about steroids or not, there is no way that you should be filling out a ballot with one name checked off on it. No way.
Absolutely not. It reminds me, not quite, but almost in a sense like umpires, where they're just like free to basically have reign over the players, but regardless of the decisions they make, they aren't usually going to get repercussions for it.
Yep, who's gonna start anything about this? Like, unless you start getting rid of writers, there's really nothing that's going to be done to prevent this from continuing happening.
Like a few years ago, I remember they slashed about 25% of them. Like they finally started to put regulations on the writers that would actually be allowed to vote. You had to like have written for a certain amount of time. You had to have written about baseball within a certain amount of time. So like it can't have been too long since you covered baseball for you to have a vote still.
From baseball.
Yeah, but then you still have all these people that are just It's like, oh yeah, well my eyes tell me better than these scientifically determined algorithms can
Yeah.
for advanced metrics. It's like, yeah, Derek Jeter was a really good defender because he made a jump throw that most shortstops get to with their forehand.
Yeah, like the eye test is the worst. The eye test people are the worst. It's like we have these numbers and metrics for a reason. Just try and read them.
Like the eye test said that Adam Jones was a Gold Glove center fielder in 2012 with negative 19 defensive runs saved, and Mike Trout that year had 21 defensive runs saved and did not win the Gold Glove over Adam Jones.
That's literally
He
laughable.
literally had
Palmeiro. What was the one Palmeiro won?
Yeah, Rafael Palmeiro won a Gold Glove playing 28 games at first base. Tell me that Gold Gloves matter for anything.
That's actually
Any
so
Gold
funny.
Glove
Like,
pre 2014
Well, or for the
did not
matter,
matter.
I mean, the whole, again, we're getting back into a process discussion, right? We know the process is broken. I mean, again, just the fact that this was Lorenzo Cain's first Gold Glove this year is nonsense. I mean, so you can go to both sides of the coin, guys who are winning them who shouldn't, and guys who haven't and should have. There's no, it's a screwed up process.
That Palmeiro thing is still my absolute favorite thing because people will actually try to use Gold Gloves as a merit of defensive quality. It's like, oh yeah, this guy won this many Gold Gloves. It's like, yeah, dude, this guy played as many games at first base as I have in my life this season, and he still won.
Well, absolutely. I think that's the common notion because when I was a kid, at least when I was growing up, until I started to understand and get into analytics, I always thought Gold Gloves was the good measure of defense because if you're a somewhat casual fan,
you're gonna think that.
Exactly. That seems like a good way to measure defense. So I feel like it is back to what we said about the whole issue with the process and kind of just the way we've gotten accustomed to it. Because, yeah, I think Gold Gloves could not be a worse way to maybe show someone's defense. Derek Jeter.
I think so. What I said, I think Gold Gloves in the past few years have definitely been better. Like they're far less of a popularity contest now because they're actually metrics to say well, yeah, this guy wasn't as good as we think he is.
Yeah, so, no, that's true.
So you can't just take a guy like Jeter and just be like, oh yeah, we'll give it to him because people like him and nobody's gonna really complain about it. And back then there was nothing saying oh yeah, you can do that. Nobody's gonna challenge you. But now when we have these things, then they're actually forced to make rational choices and decisions on who's going to win these things.
Yeah. Well, even the all MLB team, the new thing that MLB is trying to get fans to vote on now, I thought it was really interesting that when you are voting for catchers, it had their framing metrics, which I think that's a huge step for MLB themselves to be acknowledging the importance of that for catchers. So obviously the steps are slightly making progress in particular ways. So, I mean, we'll take the small wins when we can get them, us analytics crowd. So
Absolutely.
I'll take that.
Another Hall of Fame guy that has been irritating me the past 2 years. I have no beef with the guy until the Hall of Fame voting started. Omar Vizquel last year received about 45% of the vote. Scott Rowland, if I remember right, got about 12. People consider Omar Vizquel the second best defensive shortstop of all time. And it's not like he was bad, obviously, but if you're going to go on a glove only shortstop, basically what Ozzie Smith was, but Ozzie Smith was at least a relatively competent hitter, at least for the time, at least period adjusted.
Sure, for sure.
Omar couldn't hit. He had almost 2,900 hits over the span of 25 years. It would have been, if Omar Vizquel had reached 3,000 hits, it would have been the same thing as if Jamie Moyer had reached 300 wins. It's cool, you got 3,000 hits, but it took you 30 years to get there. So you're averaging 100 hits a year, and you want to be in the Hall of Fame for that. People want to put you in the Hall of Fame for averaging 100 hits a year.
Yeah, it's the longevity thing, right? When you look at it like that, 100 hits a year, I mean, that probably happens for hundreds of players every season. But see that number, almost 3,000, some of those old head writers are going to be like, oh, this is
they're gonna reward the longevity of this guy for a guy who just extended his career and was bad. Not even adequate. He was just straight bad, and he played for about 6 extra years, and he gets rewarded for being terrible for those 6 years.
Well, I'd be interested in, maybe it changes the discussion slightly, but in writers that would choose to vote for Vizquel but not vote for Larry Walker. I mean, we won't know whether that will happen or not, obviously, for a while yet, and maybe we won't find out completely at all. But, and it goes back to, again, a beef with people just voting for one player. But, there are other players who clearly are Hall of Fame caliber players that you can vote for.
And all it takes is like just 15 seconds of looking at the top of a player's baseball reference page.
Yep.
That's literally it. And,
pretty much.
And most people are still going to be voting. Like, I think a ballot came out yesterday, and it wasn't a bad ballot per se. It had Jeter, Bonds, Clemens. I think it had Walker, and like two other guys, and then it had Vizquel, no Scott Rowland.
Ugh.
And again, I have no beef with Omar Vizquel, but I absolutely hate him every time that Hall of Fame conversations are going on, because Scott Rowland was arguably as good of a defender as Omar was. He played. If you're going off of WAR, which is something that I know that people hate because they don't understand it, Rowland almost doubled Vizquel's career production in about 8 less years.
Sure.
And it gets used as a knock against Rowland and Walker. I was like, oh well, they were always hurt. It's like, okay, if they were always hurt and they still outperformed these guys, what does that tell you?
Yeah, no, I could agree with that.
Like, even if they played less than a standard person would have for the amount of seasons that they would have had, like Rowland and Walker were hurt a lot. Like, there's no way around that. But if you're going to put up Hall of Fame numbers in lesser time, you should be considered with, like, the people. If you look at, like, their per rate stats, they're right up there with anybody.
My bigger issue with that is the same people that I'm sure are, having hissy fits over their injury proneness are the same people that, have fantasies about Sandy Koufax every night. And, I mean, Koufax didn't play into his 30s, and he was elected into the Hall of Fame. So injuries happen. We're not all going to be able to play 100% into our mid 40s. But I think to your point, Brian, I mean, if they're able to put up the numbers, whether they're playing half the season, whether they're playing a third of the season, or all 162 games, they're putting up the numbers. I mean, there's no doubt they could have been potentially better, but they're still amazing.
Mm-hmm. Just want to leave you with this lasting image of Omar Vizquel. So Omar Vizquel, if you look at his Fangraphs valuations of like offense and defense, he had a career defensive value of 262.1, which is great. That's fine. Yeah. I think Rowland was in like the 180s or something, which is like still great. Whatever. Vizquel beat him. Rowland had an offensive value, I want to say roughly 250 without looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a positive 250, by the way. And the only reason I need to clarify that is the fact that Omar Vizquel's offensive value is negative 234.3 over the course of his career.
Like, and an 83 WRC plus.
Yeah.
And this man's being 17, the Hall of Fame.
A 17% below league average hitter for his career. And that's honestly probably being generous.
Yeah.
42.5 career F4, which is probably up there with the likes of, like, dude, I don't know, probably Eric Chavez.
Yeah, like the average, I believe, is 68 for position players. So 42 is not 68.
No, I mean, we're talking AAA players can, in theory, hit better than that. I mean,
like
Omar Vizquel was far below average as a hitter for his career. Like, he was literally Darwin Barney, but he played shortstop in a time where there was no metrics. Like, I was looking at it just because I was curious. Omar Vizquel was a great defender and everything, but admittedly, I used his last 5 seasons, which were just trash. But if you take his defensive value, like per season, and you take his I forget what it ended up being, but his defensive value per season using the Fangraphs measurement was less than that of Brendan Ryan. So as good of a defender as Omar was, Brendan Ryan had more defensive value per season than Omar did. So, like, I don't.
That's interesting.
Would you call Brendan Ryan a Hall of Famer because of his defense? Absolutely not.
Of course not, right?
So I don't know why that can be the case for Omar.
Again, it goes back to, the people voting, the people that are, I'm assuming the people putting out these ballots, as we said, aren't huge fans of these advanced statistics or advanced numbers. And for better or worse, they're living in a time that has come and gone long ago, but such is life.
I think I see the ballot. This must have been the one you're talking about, Brian, because this ballot it does look really good. Bonds, Clemens, Wagner, Walker, Sheffield, Schilling. But then, yeah, Omar Vizquel just kind of getting tossed in there at the end. That was probably going to be the best ballot so far, and then they just had to ruin it there with that vote for Omar at the end.
Yeah, it's not like I can complain too much because like I'm not gonna complain overly for any ballot that includes like over 6 people, but I just don't understand.
Anybody voting
like
for one person, I have a huge bone to pick with you. I'm not okay with that.
it's been years, and people are still questioning the credibility of Larry Walker as a Hall of Famer, mostly because he played in Coors Field. And it's like, okay, you have a tool that exists that can show you how good he was on the road as well.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not hard. That's what these numbers are for.
And I mean, I would say for anyone that's on Twitter too, I'll give a shout out to my boy Ryan Spader. I mean, he's now going all in on Larry Walker since now that he's moved on from Martinez. And I mean, some of the stuff that he's putting up there, I mean, it's fascinating to see how good Larry Walker was comparatively to other players of that era.
The names that he's mentioned that who he played with and whose careers relative to, it's crazy.
And just, I think the Coors effect is just, it's overdone. I mean, it's over talked about, it's overreached, whatever term you want to do. I mean, I'm sure there is a benefit to playing in Coors Field. How could there not be? On the other hand, he's still playing 81 games away from Coors Field. And, to the point that was mentioned earlier, there are park adjusted statistics. And all of this demonstrate that he's still a Hall of Fame caliber player. I mean, his numbers are in line with other individuals that are in the Hall of Fame. And to hold him out just because he played in Denver, it's nonsense.
Absolutely. I thought what I've always thought is interesting about Larry Walker is in his age 37, 38 seasons where he left Colorado and went to play for St. Louis, 144 games with 908 OPS and 134 OPS plus. So even at age 38, he's still putting up Hall of Fame numbers and outside of Coors at that. So yeah, that argument's pretty moot to me.
I don't know what else you need of the guy, like, at the end of his career, leaving this like hitter haven and still being just like a god tier hitter.
Yep.
Outside of the spacious Coors Field outfield or whatever. And his 1997 MVP season, no matter what you try to say about that one, he did OPS higher at home than he did on the road, sure. But his OPS on the road was still over 1,100.
Like that's all you need to see right there for sure. I'm sure at home it ended up being 1,300 then. Great,
no,
but
he out OPS by like 8 points. It was like 1147 to like 1135 or something ridiculous like that.
Like that road OPS wins an MVP or puts you in the conversation every single year. 1,100 OPS, like that's
like unheard of.
Like that's crazy.
Career 865 OPS on the road, better than many Hall of Famers, including guys like Al Kaline and Roy Campanella. Like the dude was a Hall of Famer in both places.
Absolutely.
We were talking about that tweet that I forget who it was that posted it, but we retweeted on Diamond Digest. How all combined Hall of Famers had something like a 920 OPS in Coors, and Larry Walker had like a career like 1,100. Like
it's all relative to everybody else, right?
Yeah,
like
you have this area where everybody's going to be a good hitter, so and that shows with the combined Hall of Fame stats. But then you have Larry Walker being way better than all of the other Hall of Famers in the same environment.
It's worth something.
It has to be.
Absolutely worth something. I definitely agree 100%. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that this is Walker's last year of eligibility, and last year he only got 50%.
It's a
And
big jump.
yeah, the 25% would kind of be an unprecedented jump, but I mean,
He did have one last year, though. What was his jump last year? 17%, something
like that. But
it was the biggest one I think that they'd had year to year. So
it's gonna have to be an unprecedented jump for that. So I mean, I guess we'll see how that ends up shaking out. But I might have been biased the first few years before all this came out because I'm a Rockies guy. But I mean, I've always been on the Larry Walker.
I'm much more so on the Larry Walker than Todd Helton train. Don't get me wrong. I think Todd Helton's got a really good Hall of Fame case, but I think Larry Walker is head and shoulders more
absolutely better. Yep. Absolutely a better case.
So it's gonna be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess all we can do is keep tracking ballots. So there's only 7 public right now. So
yeah, shout out Mr. Tibbs. I love following Mr. Tibbs every Hall of Fame season. That account is so great on Twitter. Definitely gotta give him a shout out. Those guys do great work. That is so impressive. The stuff they put together and the big Excel file with everybody who they voted for, who they took off their ballots, out of their ballots. Yeah, it's great. I love that. It makes keeping track of everything a lot more easier around this time of year.
It's one of my favorite parts about the offseason, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It's always a good debate between people is who you think's a Hall of Famer or not. That's always going to get a good discussion going between a couple people for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully next time we'll have a little bit more to talk about in terms of the Hall of Fame votes. So we can get a little tally together. Hope Tibbs does the Hall of Fame tracking ballot so we can pull up those numbers and just kind of have a little discussion about how people are trending and stuff. And hopefully there will be some good news to share on the Larry Walker front.
Yeah, hopefully we got some more free agents signed. This Grandal's got the ball rolling. Hopefully next time we're talking, we got some big signings. Hopefully a Strasburger or Garrett Cole pitching in Fenway. I'm excited.
Boy, you got Chris Sale. You need to calm down.
Yeah, Chris Sale's coming back. Everyone can hop off the Chris Sale train. I am full on the conductor of the Chris Sale 2020 bandwagon. He's coming back with vengeance.
Oh, he'll be back with fury.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Until next time, signing off with Brian, John, and Nate. See you guys next time.
Take it easy, man.